Good
Evening
and welcome
to
the show. This is
Okay.
Samuel ICanWin,
and I'm Robbie ICanWin.
and on tonight's show we're actually going to be talking about family for real. So guys, I hope you are ready to go. Hope your seat belts are fastened, and I hope that this is a time for you to have your maybe even your notepad and your pen as we basically discuss a number of different views, number of different issues as it pertains to family, and we're going to be focusing on a specific topic more than anything else. So hopefully this is really going to resonate with you, open up your heart, open up your mind, in order for you to move forward and develop as it pertains to basically family and how you think about family and what family really means to you. So we were discussing before the show, and we thought it would be a really good idea to do a 1 minute of silence, okay? And I'll let Robbie share with you guys why we're doing this and for what purpose.
Okay, so as I'm sure many of you are aware, there's been a real pandemic going on. Like the media's covered it a lot in America, but it is happening in quite a lot of places. But there seems to be an agenda of a huge massacre of the black men, and specifically I'm talking about in America currently. Even just the past 3 months, there have been quite a few assassinations. But the more recent one was on Monday, which was about 5 days ago now, and it was of a gentleman called George Floyd. I don't know him personally, but his murder was filmed and viewed by many on camera. And it honestly, for me, it has been quite traumatizing to watch. But also, I feel like I'm really feeling the loss of another member of our community being assassinated in such a manner. So, yeah, that's what it's about.
Cool. So with that being said, we're going to start a 1 minute silence. Then after that 1 minute silence, we're going to jump straight into the show. So okay guys, so I just hope and pray that George Floyd's family will receive grace at this time and also mercy at this time in order for them to succeed moving forward in their life, and for them to have a deeper understanding of the fact that this life is temporal. And I also pray that George Floyd is able for his soul to rest in peace as he moves forward, also out of the natural world into the world that is more so spiritual. So guys, today's show, we wanted to keep on this theme of some of the things that have been taking place in the current climate. And as we talk about family for real, what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring in this idea of families going through loss, okay? And specifically like families who go through loss, and how do they actually deal with that? How do they work through that? Now, as a clear example, we've mentioned George Floyd at the beginning of the show. We've obviously done a 1 minute of silence. But it's like this man, no matter who you are in the world, you have a family. Okay, so this man had a family. There was talk earlier that we found out about. He died apparently on the 2-year anniversary of his mother dying, which again is family oriented. We saw his sister in one of the interviews basically talking about her loss and how she is praying and hoping and she has faith that basically justice will be served. And again, that's family, guys. So family is kind of interwoven into every aspect of our society, and it's a lot of the time unfortunate that it's when extremely tragic things happen or extremely, you know, great things happen that family are actually recognized or considered as part of somebody's journey. So what we're going to be talking about today is in and around that theme. We're going to be touching on all of that because right now in the current climate we're in some really like interesting times of this century. You know, you've had mention of a virus. From mention of a virus, you've had a number of countries across the globe telling people to stay in their home. Then from this kind of lockdown environment, we've still seen the persistent murder of certain kind of people across the globe, or I'd say the consistent mistreatment of certain kind of people, even leading to death in many of the cases. I think that's a better way to say it, because very recently we saw, and again this is family oriented, we saw a video that was going viral in the UK of a black man that was with his son. Apparently his son was like 5 or 6 years old, and okay, it was in Manchester, and this guy was tased. Like, he was tased by 2 police officers. You know, one police officer doing the tasing, but the 2 police officers are there, they're both complicit, but he's tased, you know, to the ground, whilst his son, who's not even a teenager, is there watching, observing all of this. And again, you know, this comes again like back to the trauma. Robbie was talking about trauma earlier. It comes back to the kind of trauma that people can face going through such things, which I think is inhumane. Like, if I'm gonna be very transparent, I think it's inhumane what some people are put through and how it has a direct result on other people, potentially in many cases for the rest of their life. So yeah, like, just to open it up, I'll ask you the question, Robbie, like, you know, what is it like to lose somebody? Like, just full stop generally. And the reason I ask you that is because, like, some of you who are watching this may not know, but very soon after Robbie and I connected, she lost her grandparent. Okay, she lost one of her grandparents, her grandmother. And it wasn't to, you know, violence or all of the things that we're talking about today, but Robbie's someone who's engaged with that, you know, with someone very close, whereas I haven't as much. So in that sense. So yeah, so for yourself, like, what would you say it's like to actually lose somebody? Like, is that a light thing, or is that something that can be very, very emotional? Like, what's been your experience with loss? I guess that's a better way to ask the question.
My experience with loss, it's interesting because growing up, the church I attended, there were many losses, many funerals, and not even just the church, but the church community that I grew up in. So some of them weren't exactly from my church, but from the community. And there were plenty of funerals that I attended growing up, which is very different to Samuel. Like, Samuel, I think he's only ever been to one.
I think 2. I've attended 2 funerals. One was, I believe, Pastor Peter Nembard's mum.
Oh yes, that's right, yeah.
And the second funeral that I've attended was one of my nephews. Is actually the firstborn nephew in my family. But again, he didn't live to be 1 year old, etc. So there wasn't kind of that relationship and bond as obviously yourself with your grandparent, or as you're bringing in terms of the community that you faced as well. So
yeah, I couldn't tell you how many funerals I've been to because there's been that many. Sometimes it was people that we knew very well. Sometimes it was just people that were in the community, but you had to attend because, you know, it's part of the community. I've seen plenty of open caskets as a child, so I think that kind of became like a norm to me. And I can't say I've been desensitized to it, but I don't feel, what's the word? I don't feel, resistant to go to a funeral. Like, I feel like, okay, let's go, kind of thing. Where Samuel's quite the opposite. He's not about that life.
I'm the opposite, 100%.
He's not about that life at all.
What's that term? Is it when people are
desensitized?
No, there's a term where it's like these people are. It's not like over spiritual, but there's a term where they relate superstitious.
Okay.
That's it. It's like I don't. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. Like, I don't know if the roots behind my reluctance to engage with funerals and stuff like that is around superstition. Again, coming from an African background, rather than the Afro-Caribbean or Caribbean background, it's like, you know, funerals aren't something you
are excited to go to.
Yeah, you're not excited. You're not excited to attend a funeral. In the African community, from my upbringing, like, a funeral is not a good thing. Let me just put it that way, like, as a general sense. And I get it. Like, I know whatever culture you're from, a funeral is not a good thing. But I'm saying this from an African perspective in terms of my upbringing. Like, a funeral is not a good thing. And the reason I say it like that is because the way I was raised, it's like, you don't want to go to a funeral. Like, you don't want to be in a position where you end up having to go to a funeral. And this is why I'm bringing up the fact that I don't know if it's based on superstition. But as I transitioned into an adult, I started to understand a lot of different things. I started to read the Bible. I started to read about, you know, you need to mourn with those who are mourning. And I do my utmost best to engage with people who are going through certain predicaments and empathize with them, and mourn with those who are mourning. But at the same time, funerals, it's not my thing. I feel like there's a lot of spiritual elements associated with that stuff. Which again, obviously, this is family for real, so I'll keep it real, like, and I'll speak openly. It's like, I feel as though the way many funerals are conducted as well, there's a lot of elements of risk to people who are living, in my opinion.
What do you mean?
So, okay, so when you say what do I mean, like, I mean, like, for example, if you're attending a funeral and people are talking, and again, guys, this might be controversial, that's cool, like, that's what the show's for. But if you're attending a funeral and you've got people talking about, oh, she's still here with us, you know, she can hear us, like, I just heard her speak to me, do you get what I'm saying? Like, you know, Robbie's laughing, but it's like, for me, I don't find that stuff funny because,
that was like a woof.
well, the reality about a lot of those things, okay, when there is loss, and then you have misrepresentation, because people forget a lot of the time that people are being educated every moment, and my big thing is education. So if someone has been taken from us, if I put it that way, and then there's misrepresentation around that whole process of death, you know, like, if I use the term just so that you guys know the kind of language I'm talking about reincarnation, you know, whatever it is, resurrection, that if there's misrepresentation around that stuff, the problem with that is that educates people. So for me, I don't want, as an example, my children in an environment where people are going to be miseducating them around certain things, which are very important things in terms of our life, but unfortunately, or fortunately, are rarities. So what I mean by rarities is people don't go to funerals every day. So if they only go to funerals once or twice in a lifetime, and those one or two times, you know, the process, the scenario of death, etc., is misrepresented, that sticks deeper than sitting down with a child and saying to a child, look, this is what happens, this is how it happens, etc. So for me, in terms of child rearing, you know, having a place of responsibility over other people's children, in terms of being, you know, a caretaker of other people's lives and a steward of other people's lives, to support them, help them, lead them in any way, shape or form. Again, I'm not saying I don't go to funerals. Like, obviously, Robbie shared a number of funerals I have been to, but they're minimal.
Not a number.
Well,
Just
two's a number. Two's a number. I took maths for long enough. Two's a number. Okay, but the reality is, guys, I just feel that, like, there's a lot of misrepresentation. I also feel as though, coming from the black culture, if I put it that way as well, there's also a lot of misrepresentation pre-funeral, which I think doesn't help. I.e., you got these people who don't plan for their death and everybody knows they're gonna die. You got these people who don't put money aside for their death and everybody knows they're gonna die. You got people who haven't expressed their wishes for their death and everybody knows they're gonna die. And you've got people who don't arrange their affairs before their death and everybody knows they're gonna die. So stuff like that, for me, I feel like in the black culture, in the black community, is sky high compared to other communities. And I think that is another misrepresentation, which then has a filtering knock-on effect to the rest of the community, because now you're being asked for money. For example, someone's died and people are asking you for money, or people are saying, let's contribute to this or contribute to that, when the reality is, hold on a minute, like, this shouldn't become about money, okay, if people put their affairs in order appropriately. But again, this ain't a finger pointing exercise. This is just a clarification process in terms of people understanding how I see a lot of this stuff. So yeah,
cool. So back to answering the question.
finally.
Yeah. Don't come at him for cutting me off. It's alright. Don't worry. So for me, because I attended so many funerals in the past, it just felt like a normal part of life to me. Just like a wedding. I attended lots of weddings, lots of funerals as a child. So not teenager, as a child. Like I remember one incident where my mum was singing in the choir at a funeral, and it was an open casket funeral. So she left me with one of my uncles and said, "Oh, can you look after her while I go and sing up in the choir?" So they were singing up. She was singing in the choir whilst people were coming out to view the body. And he grabbed me by the hand and said, "Come on, let's go."
How old was you?
I must have been like 5, 6.
That's crazy.
Maybe even younger, because my brother and sister weren't there and they had left home by then. So I was about 3, 4. I wasn't 3. I was about 4, 5 or 6. And so
that's
I walked
crazy.
up to the thing.
I think that's crazy.
And he took me there. I saw the body, and I looked at my mum, and she was just livid. Like, she was looking at the uncle.
She can't be.
And she was like, "What are you doing? Why are you bringing her up here?" Like, she was trying to mouth it whilst trying to sing at the same time. And I remember looking at her and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. And she explained later on, it wasn't me. It was obviously, she didn't expect the uncle to take me up as well.
See, this is the problem, having expectations but not actually creating limitations or boundaries.
Yeah, so, so in terms of losing people, I think because all the people that I attended funerals of, they weren't always close to me. They were just like maybe a member of the church, etc. I never really felt the impact of it until I think my grandma died. Because I don't think I lost anyone like close to me before that. Actually, I did lose she was a cousin to me. A lot of people know of her, Charlotte Polius.
And you lost her to gang violence, to violence. Let's use that terminology.
She was murdered. But yeah, that hit home a lot actually. And then I think after her was another person that I grew up with. So I grew up with her, grew up with another boy who took his life, and that hit home as well. I was like, "Oof, this is painful." And then with my grandma, I never got to see her a lot as a child for other reasons, but when I got older and it was my choice to go and see her, I would go and visit her, especially when she got unwell. So we got very close towards the end of her life, and I think that hit me a lot because I just started to build a relationship with her for real. And I just, I was caring for her. I was taking her to the hospital, etc. So yeah, it was a lot of things. But I think I feel like perspective has a lot to do with it, with how you cope with it. Because if we look at the Word of God and see what the Word says about death and life, the only time where it feels painful is when you know the person hadn't surrendered their life to Christ, and it's kind of like, even in that point, you just have to give that to God, because God knows. Like, unless you were there at the point of their death and lived their life with them, you don't even know what their
commitments they made,
what their judgment is, like their end result's gonna be. So even in that, you just have to give it to God. Like, Lord, I trust you. You know, with my nan, she was a Catholic and a very devout Catholic, and I tried to speak to her about giving her life to Christ, and and she was always talking about Mary, and I was like, Grandma, no, that's not, no. But it was hard because she was suffering with dementia at the time, so it was hard to even communicate certain things to her. But yeah, I just give it to God. And I remember that the main feeling I felt when she died was regret, because the day she died, I wanted to go see her that morning, and I think my parents said, "I'll just see her later" or something, and I was like, "Okay, cool, I'll do that later then." And then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I got the call and she had passed. So I didn't get to see her the day she died, and I felt a bit of regret.
Did you get the call, or did I get the call?
Oh yeah, you got the call, didn't you?
Yeah.
He's like, don't tell Robbie or something, or tell Robbie or something.
I don't know.
So
I don't know how it was. It was a long time ago now. It's 8 years,
10,
maybe 9 or 10 years ago.
It was 2010 that happened.
All right, cool. So 10 years ago, what I remember is I was called and I was told of what happened.
Can you let her know?
And I was told. It was kind of like
you know how to do it best.
She's Robbie's fragile.
Oh yeah, I remember. She's very sensitive.
And because she's sensitive, we don't know how she's gonna deal with this kind of thing. But at the same time, like, Robbie wasn't my wife at that point. So it wasn't like we were married and it was like cool, like
we'd only been together for a month.
Yeah, it was early. Like we'd been together for a short amount of time, but everybody knew like what this was. But that's because we knew what this was.
Oh no, we'd actually only been together for a few weeks because that was November.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it was November, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were early in our relationship, but everybody knew what it was because we knew what it was at that stage, or we believed we did anyway. So yeah, so I was basically told that Robbie's fragile. Because of that, this is the information. You know, I know you're gonna be with her or whatever at some point today, or you're with her already or whatever. Just yeah, I can't remember whether it was let her know or whatever.
Break it to her in a way that you know she could do it.
I basically told her, innit? And it's like my respect for Robbie at the time was that Robbie's an adult. And she knows how to carry herself. So I let her know, and I was kind of open and ready for whatever reaction and response would ever ensue, because at the end of the day, it's like she's with me, like we're together at that time. So if she starts to cry, boy, I got to mourn with those who mourn, etc., etc. So that was kind of my mindset. But
I was cool. I was cool. I knew she was about to
you
pass.
dealt with it well.
Yeah, because she had dementia and she was suffering with cancer as well. So I was very much like, okay, I'm ready. I've never been the type to be like, ah, do you know what I mean? So even in that, I was like, okay, like let me go and see my nan. And because I think at that point we discussed funerals and death, and I knew that Samuel wasn't too keen on it. So when Samuel then decided that he's going to come with me to the hospital, I was blown away. I was like, what? You're not going to come with me to the hospital after you don't even like funerals? What's going on? And that ministered to me a lot. Like from my memory, that's one of the main things I remember about that time, was how Samuel was very present. Very, very present. And he even came into the room where my nan was, where she was dead, and came in. That obviously that was his first time meeting her, but she'd gone, and I was just blown away, like, wow, he's actually come. And that's when my uncle met you for the first time, and my uncle's wife, etc. So yeah, it was a lot of things. But in terms of the loss, I just feel like God has always prepared me when it's been someone close. So when it was my nan, my first nan hadn't passed at that time, had she?
I don't think so. I think she passed exactly roughly a year after. From my memory, they both died on the same day, both my nans, but it was like a year or two in what's the word? Difference. But before my nan died, the one we're talking about, I remember crying. It was a Thursday, and I was just crying all night. And I was like, Lord, why am I crying? I felt like I was mourning. And I was like, Lord, why am I crying? I feel so sad. What's going on? And I just allowed myself to just cry. I just sat there crying till about 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I went to sleep, woke up, and I said, oh, I'm going to go and see my nan. And then I was told, oh, no, do you know what, just go and see her later. And it was that day that she died. So she died on a Friday at 4 o'clock. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning that I was crying until. So it was really interesting. So when I heard the news, I felt prepared. I felt ready. And in that moment, I remember feeling so loved by God, because it was like, wow, you prepared me for this, to the point where I don't feel like I'm mourning. I feel very much prepared. I feel like, okay, Lord, you've given me the preparation for this. That's cool. I can deal with this. Like, it's not too much for me to handle. And what I loved about God was that even before that day, He prepared me. So I started taking photos with my nan. I started taking videos of her. Just to keep memories of her, because I didn't grow up with her. And one of the things, apologies to cut you, one of the things that was powerful for me is that whenever Robbie reminds me that the first time I actually met her nan was after she had passed away, I always have to remind myself that's the truth. And the reason is because Robbie was taking videos with her nan. Prior to your nan passing away, I had taken you to go see your nan. Right, yeah. And because I'd taken Robbie to go see her nan, I think I might have actually seen her through the door or something, but it's like I kind of felt as though I had met her. I kind of felt as though, yeah, you know, that's Robbie's nan kind of thing. Like they're in my mind, there was kind of like a connection, even though it was a very light one. And Robbie's absolutely right. Like the first time I actually saw her close and in person was actually after she had died. So one of the things I want to say as well, just on my side, is my issue is not dead people. Okay, my issue is, or my issue was, if we're talking in that language, was funerals. Okay, and the reason I said that, I've probably seen more people dead than I've attended funerals.
That's
okay,
true.
which is weird, but that's been my life. That's how I got to where I am right now. So I've been in a situation where I've seen people that are passing away / have passed away. Okay, and again, it's not something to glamorize. It's not necessarily a nice feeling at all. I feel like one thing to definitely be said about that scenario is, or those kind of scenarios and situations, is you end up, or you actually at those times have a lot of questions in your head, like a lot of questions in your head, especially determined on how that circumstance arises. So on that day, supporting you, being with you to go and see Nan, it wasn't kind of like a, oh, I've got to do this thing. I didn't feel guilty. It was just really more so like, Robbie needs the support. This is her family, and for us to really show that support for one another, which is right, which is what we was doing for one another at that time quite majorly, is to go with you.
Yeah.
So
and it's very true, because Samuel was there, but you didn't attend the funeral, did you?
I don't think I
dropped me
attended
off
the funeral.
even.
I don't know, but I don't remember attending the funeral.
think
Well, I wouldn't have attended the funeral
because
I've only been to 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it ministered a lot to me, and I didn't feel too like anyway the fact that he didn't come to the funeral, because it was like this ain't his thing, So yeah, that's my experience with loss. But I don't know if we're just talking about death loss, but even in terms of like loss of relationships, I feel like I felt them more than the loss of, in terms of death.
The reason why this is powerful, you've come onto this, is because of where I wanted to go with this. What I wanted to say is, based on what you've shared, it seems as though from what Robbie shared that there's a proximity factor, i.e. being in church, being in a particular community, having multiple funerals taking place, and not really feeling like, ouch. But then as an adult, your nan passes away, and obviously there was that relationship, so that proximity factor, the fact that we are actually close, maybe is a byproduct of why it was like, I felt that, and God had to prepare me the day before, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm thinking maybe there is an element of proximity that plays a part. But now Robbie's speaking about actual relationships, and how certain relationships, which is funny, for those of you who haven't seen the live stream we did last week, we were talking about relationships for real, as we were speaking about faith. So go watch that live stream after this one. But yeah, it's like, in terms of relationships, you're saying, well, there's been relationships you've had where have been severed, or they've cut off or whatever, and you've had to mourn them probably more so than people 100%. That have passed away. So that's really powerful, because what I was thinking in my head is kind of like about protection, support and help, because obviously we're talking about family. So how do you support people through this? And especially with the example you gave about your mum leaving you with a member of family, and this member of family making a decision that it seemed as though your mum wasn't necessarily happy with. Like, how as a family do you think people can protect themselves in the midst of loss? And again, we're talking about both the loss of relationship, the loss of life, bereavement, grieving, etc.
I think one thing to also mention is, as well as the proximity factor, but also like you mentioned earlier, the circumstance around the death. Because, for example, when I mentioned the girl I grew up with, Charlotte Podius, she was taken suddenly. She was age 15 from my memory, and she was stabbed to death. And so that is like a because it's like you didn't expect it. It came like out of the blue. And again, with the guy that I grew up with who killed himself, again it was like it's out of the blue. But with my nan, it was something I was kind of humanely in my natural sense was
you
preparing
logically
for.
Deduced that at some point this was going to happen, and
then
potentially sooner rather than later.
And then was prepared for it the day before. So yeah, I think that's a major factor, and I think being sensitive to those things plays a major part in how you interact with people. So for example, if Samuel was kind of like, oh, Robs, I'm so sorry about your nan, like, oh, but it probably would have been a bit like, okay, it's cool, Samuel, calm down, it's alright, I think it's going to happen, it's okay. Whereas maybe in another scenario, God forbid, of a sudden death, like, it might have felt like I needed him to be like, oh, you're okay, it's going to be alright, for example. But yeah, it's like the Bible does say, mourn with those who mourn. And yeah, I think it's important to be sensitive to people's human nature, but I also think it's important to know your word, because the Bible provides a lot of comfort for those who have lost, who experience loss. And even the Lord himself says that he's gone through all these things that we've gone through. Like he's able to minister to us, like he's able to understand. And there's a scripture, I believe it's in Corinthians, can't remember the location of it right now, but there's a scripture that says that we have been comforted in our times of loss, for example, so that we can comfort others. And I think it's very important to not take your life experiences in vain or with confusion, like, Lord, why me? But to remember that there's one who came before us who's experienced all of this. Like, the Lord cried when Lazarus had died, so he's experienced that feeling of loss, but he's able to comfort us, and then with that same comfort that we receive, we're meant to comfort others. So I think that's something to keep in mind and be aware of. And yeah, I think that's something that's important. I feel like I failed many times in the past to do that, and I feel like it was because I felt inadequate. So I didn't feel adequate enough to provide encouragement or comfort. It's like, what can I say? I don't know. What can I do? Do you know what I mean? And I think in the midst of that feeling, I've just kind of shied away from being present with those who have lost, because I felt like I don't know what to say. But that's when coming to the Lord and relying on his Holy Spirit is so important, because he gives you the ability to speak things, and even bring back to your remembrance things that you know about the word, so that you can comfort others. Some people need words, some people need a hug, some people just need your presence, and I think it's important to know and discern those differences. And when you can't discern, just give it all. Your time, your
presence,
your
your words,
service,
your service,
your physical touch, hugs. Yeah.
Powerful. So the verse Robbie paraphrased is 2 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 4. It says, who comforteth us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble by the comfort wherewith we ourselves are comforted by God. So that's 2 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 4. Thank you for sharing that. No, you're welcome. So for me, all of the things we're talking about, I think, are extremely powerful. I find a number of the things we're talking about extremely powerful for a number of reasons. One of the things that comes to my mind in terms of what we're talking about, again, around this whole theme of protection, support and help, is, I feel as though I picked some of those things up when you were talking about the loss of Nan. The first thing, you didn't say it in this order, but these are the two things that I picked up. The first one was, obviously you've just alluded to it again, but committing things to God. A, the preparation beforehand. B, the fact that it was God who was preparing you. That wasn't you preparing yourself. That was you not even understanding what was going on. Again, going back to the 2 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 4, he's comforted you through means of taking you through that journey of mourning the night before, whatever. So the first thing is the powerful factor that, hold on a minute, you can be comforted. So you need to engage with Christ. You need to engage with God. So the first thing is, again, like most of the time on our channel, faith, okay? So operating on the God level rather than on the man level. Yeah. So that's the first thing I took. The second thing is when you were speaking about the fact that I was very present, I supported you, etc. And again, it's not a plug on me, but it's a reality that we need to be there. Because for me, I know over the years, this is something we've spoken about a lot. So Robbie doesn't talk about this a lot, but Robbie's got a degree in psychology, okay? And this is part of the reason why on our show, a lot of the time I'm asking her questions, okay? But not only does she have a degree in psychology, obviously she's a qualified teacher, okay? Equally, I qualified to teach as well. And we both qualified at different levels of the strata in terms of education. So Robbie qualified at a primary level, I qualified at secondary A-level level. Now the reason I find this important is because both of us in our employment, in our full-time employment world, before we jumped into property and all this other stuff and ministry more time, we dealt with children and child development. And one of the things we used to speak about a lot, and we still speak about today, is not necessarily the child development, but the added adult development that takes place, i.e. why parents behave a certain way, and as a direct byproduct, why their children end up how they end up, etc., etc. So for me, as I'm just sharing all of this stuff, the thing that I'm really thinking about is, okay, we need to be there. We can't forsake being there. There's no there's no amount of money, there's no amount of replacements that are going to make it adequate to not be there. And the reason I'm saying that is because you shared about Nan and about how before she passed away, you were spending more time with her, you was recording, you was taking pictures, etc. Now, side by side with that, if you're trying to protect someone from loss, for me, I spoke earlier on in the show about my concern with funerals and the miseducation that takes place a lot of the time, so I guess like my mindset is really about, like, again, going back to the key question, like what kind of principles can we share with people to help them understand how to support people, whether it be people around them, people in there. Like my heart right now is really thinking about the immediate family, like the immediate family. So I'll share this with you guys so you get some more context. Now, although like I've said, I've probably only been to 2 funerals. Okay, again, that's me. I have a number of family connections, affiliates who have, I've got family members, let me just put it that way, I've got a number of family members who have died, who have been murdered, okay, so let me use that terminology, who have been murdered due to, unseemly and what I believe are untimely deaths, okay? So, I have a number of brother-in-laws that have passed away, that have been murdered. I've got a nephew who was murdered a number of years ago. Now, we're talking about as recent as last year, okay? As recent as last year. This time last year, it was roughly a month from now, last year. I remember I was speaking at a property event, June the 18th, I believe. I was the main speaker at a property event, spoke at the event in Essex, got home. It was like 1, 2 in the morning. I'm getting a phone call. Your brother-in-law has been murdered. Okay. Now, guys, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I want you to understand. Like, yes, I may not have attended certain funerals, but I've experienced a whole lot of grief, and I'll put it that way. Now, the reason I bring that up, and the reason I think it's important to bring that up, is because I've seen mourning in ways that I don't want people to mourn. I'm just being very, very transparent. And I'm not saying it to say that, the people who are mourning in that way shouldn't have mourned that way. That they have to mourn that way because they don't know anything else. Like when you don't know what to do, you can only do what you know to do, if that makes sense. And if that is scream, if that is shout, if that is cry, and there's nothing wrong with any of these things, I'm just giving you examples, that's what has to happen. And that makes sense to me. But the point I'm making is, tragedy leaves a trail. Okay, tragedy leaves a trail, and this is one of the reasons why we don't need to operate out of a vernacular of tragedy, if that makes sense. We need to learn how to basically, teach and support, and I think that's the key word there. Like, again, I'm going back to that word, but support our families so that even in times of distress, times of trauma, times of tribulation, as the Corinthians verse was saying, we need to be able to know, you got my back. Okay, and it starts, like I said a moment ago, it starts with our relationship with God, but it then shifts into our relationship with our peoples. And I think that's so important. So any other views you have on kind of like how we can support our families, and again, when I'm saying families, all encompassing the children in our community, the adults, elders, cousins, brothers, sisters, how do you support family, in the midst of loss? Because, and again, I'm being really mindful right now that we've got this gentleman who was slaughtered. In my opinion, he was slaughtered. A human should never have another human's body part, knee, on someone's body. 9 minutes, they said. That's grotesque murder, okay? And I personally believe, I think it was you who used the word earlier, assassination. I believe that's an assassination. I think you've assassinated somebody. You've come out, and dealt with a person in a way where they're not walking out of that. So, in regards to that, right now what's happening in the US, in the particular state, is they've had 4 or 5 days of rioting, okay, which started with protests. Some of the news we've seen has indicated that the non-peaceful part is basically engineered, okay? So I'll throw that out there. Maybe, after a couple of hours when we finish on this stream, we'll add in the description. So in the description, you will see a link to one of the videos we've watched, basically just alluding to how some of this stuff has been fixed, okay? But from peaceful protesting, let's use that as an example, peaceful protesting, rioting, and all other manner of things, screaming, shouting, mourning, looting, just being quiet, being solemn. You mentioned earlier being able to deal with it because you've already been prepared. through all of these things, how do you actually support people to deal with loss? You know, how does a family support themselves to deal with loss?
It's an interesting question, and it's kind of hard because it's not a one size fits all scenario. Loss can be so many different things for so many different people, and yeah, it's in terms of how you help others. I think it's very imperative to be led of the Spirit, because what you may see as, oh, I've been there, I was there for that person, they may see it as, you weren't about, what are you talking about? And for me, personally, I feel like, I said it already, I feel like I could have been more present for my family when they lost members of their family. And I think it, like I said, I think it came from I don't know what to do, so I'll do nothing kind of thing. But I remember when I was doing first aid training, and the man who was teaching said, look, never do nothing. He said, something is better than nothing. Always do something. And he said, because something could save someone's life, whereas nothing will do nothing. And in terms of loss, I think it's the same thing. Like, even if you make a mistake, you know, oh, I won't do that next time, or I won't do that with that person next time. But doing nothing means that you never know what to do next time. And even if it's a text message, even if it's a phone call, Samuel prefers phone calls, I often prefer text messages, but phone calls I think are more preferable in this scenario, because if someone cannot answer, they will just not answer. Or they'll say, they'll send you a message, I can't talk right now, do you know what I mean? Whereas they may feel that a text message is a bit like distant and far off, like, hold on, don't we know each other, why are you texting me? So I think phone calls are important. Being present in person, I think, is important. Because oftentimes people don't need words. Sometimes they just need to be held. Sometimes they just need to know, oh, this person's here. They need to remember your face. Next year when they look back and say, oh, who was there again? They need to be able to see your face, just so they know you were there. So yeah, I think it is dependent on who you're working with. It also works with who you are as a person. Some people are very touchy-feely, you know, I gotta make sure they feel me. Whereas some people are like, I've got the words to say, and I'm going to share with you this encouragement because God's given me the words. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. But
I think it certainly does, because what you've done is you've given a whole bunch of practical ways people can support one another in terms of bereavement and loss. And like you said, it's not even just loss of life, also loss of relationship. One of the things I wanted to touch on was on the flip side, because, you know, my dad used to make this statement, and it was, no condition is permanent. And on the flip side, what I want to encourage people to understand and to know is that if you are going through loss, if you are going through bereavement, you know, please bear in mind that a time will come, a season will come where that season is over. And a time and a season will come where that mourning is over, or at least the peak of that mourning is over. And the reason I want to share that is because I want people to be aware that the people that you may assume were not there for you, you may have to change direction about your assumption, because later on down the line, what you might find is that they were there for you, but like Robbie was saying, they might not have known what to do, so therefore they did nothing. They froze like a deer in headlights, as they say. So I want to say on the flip side, because I want to encourage those people, because you might have gone through a period of mourning, a period of loss, and you might have stonewalled people. You might have treated people like, I don't want to give you access, I don't want to speak to you. Like Robbie was talking about, you know, not picking up the phone. Certain people might not pick up the phone, they might not engage, okay? But the reality is, there's no place you can go to where you can't turn back from that. And I just want to encourage people in that. And the reason I want to encourage people in that is because I've seen and I've heard of places where people mourn to a certain degree, an extreme degree. They basically push people away from themselves. They come out of that season and they don't know how to deal with their life anymore because they have no support, they have no one around them. And that can lead to suicide. That can lead to a whole bunch of other stuff which we're not trying to encourage. So I want to encourage you as well. Like, if you're that kind of person, you've been in that predicament, you've been in that situation, maybe you've pushed people away because you've said to yourself, no, you've got to get through this, you're the only one who can get through this, you've got to get through this on your own. Similar to the film we was watching the other day, that movie was powerful, where that army soldier was saying he's broken, and he met this woman, and the woman was trying to help him.
Yeah, great film to watch. It's called Do You Believe?
Do You Believe? Okay.
Recommended by our brother and sister-in-law.
Yeah, so our brother and sister recommended that film, Do You Believe? We watched it a couple of nights ago, and for me it was powerful because you see this guy pushing people away, but the people he's pushing away are the same people that are going to help him. And this is the problem a lot of the time, because in loss, that's what happens a lot of the time. We're pushing away the very people that can support us and help us. So go for it.
Also, in one thing to be aware of is for those who experience loss themselves, and corporately, as in you're not the only one experiencing the loss. Maybe your siblings experiencing it with you, or your spouse is experiencing it with you. Just to be aware that other people deal with loss differently, and that's usually down to how they're brought up, usually down to what they've experienced in life, but not everyone's going to cry when they lose someone. It's the same with when someone bangs their toe. I remember my brother-in-law said this one time. He said, someone might walk and hit their little toe, some might scream, some might go some will just be like everyone deals with those things differently, everyone deals with pain differently. So you can't just think, oh, because they never screamed it didn't hurt them. Like, are you human? Didn't that hurt you? People deal with things differently, and that's something to be aware of, even in the midst of dealing with your own pain, your own trauma. Like for me, for example, watching this video of George Floyd being killed, I literally was bawling like a baby. I felt the pain. I was just like, Samuel, how could they do this? Like, what are they doing? The injustice, the heart of man is just... I was emotional. And Samuel didn't react like that. But I know he felt the heaviness, the pain from watching that as well, because of something he does. Like, he usually just goes away and starts praying, or he'll start singing to the Lord, or he'll just go away. And he did that. And when he did that, I thought, oh, Samuel's dealing with this as well. Like, he's dealing with another one's been killed unjustly, assassinated. Like, he's dealing with it, but he's not crying like I am. But it doesn't mean he's feeling the pain any less or any more. So yeah, just being aware of that trauma can be translated in different ways. Yeah, I think that's very much something to deal with, because I know that, like, it's even in a lot of films, like, you see a couple who've lost a baby, and the wife is very emotional, still stuck in it. Like, they have the child's bedroom set up and they won't let it go, whereas the man's like, come on, we need to move on. And the woman often interprets that as, you don't care, like, you're over it, like, you don't you feel the pain, whereas it's not that. And not understanding that people deal with things differently can result in other things like divorce, like suicide, etc. So I think being understanding in the midst of trying to be understood is very key.
See, I think that's really powerful, and I think that's powerful for several reasons. One of the reasons I think it's really powerful is because of relationships. So Robbie spoke earlier about, at times she's had relationships break up, or loss of relationships which have been even more impactful or more impressionable than actual bereavement loss. And the reason why this is interesting to me is because I think that's where a lot of drama comes when relationships do break up, in your exit strategy. Because like Robbie said, if I'm really feeling challenged by something, a lot of the time I'll walk away. Like, that's one of my coping mechanisms. I'll walk away and deal with it with my God. That's kind of how I rationalize how to deal with things, especially things that are hard to deal with, because I can't deal with a hard to deal with situation with a person. That doesn't make sense, because we're going to be hard with one another. But if I can deal with it with God, I know I can't be harder than God, if that makes sense, But at the same time, I can't be softer than God. So I know I'm in good hands, if that makes sense. But the reason why I think this is really powerful talking about this is because in relationships, you might have two people who are kind of deciding to go separate ways in a relationship, and one of them reacts hysterically. For example, I've been in that situation before, where I was dealing with a person who was behaving extremely hysterical. And now, I'm not saying their behavior was unjustified. I'm not saying their behavior was inappropriate. I'm just saying their behavior was this kind of behavior. But whilst that person was acting hysterical, I was trying to maintain civilization, composure. Yeah, because one of the things I'm very mindful of is two hysterical people are an accident waiting to happen. Okay, and I'm not saying that you can't have more than two people, going off, with fireworks being ballistic. No, I'm not. But what I am saying is, if they're the only two people there, something's gonna happen, which is probably more tragic than what they're complaining or moaning or mourning about. So for me, I always try to think to myself, well, look, do I want to be a person who lacks, and I don't want to use this term because I'm not pointing a finger, but who lacks an element of self-control in a particular scenario, when I know there needs to be a ratio, there needs to be someone who doesn't lack the self-control in that scenario. So if this thing occurs again, or you know what I'm trying to say, like there's people who are composed who can be like, okay, look, we need to do this, or you know what, let's pipe down, or you know what, it will be okay, or like you were saying, some people are going to come with a word, some people are going to come with a hug, some people are going to come with the emotion. People are going to come with different things. So for me, hearing Robbie share those last few things really just made me think about relationships in general, and how when relationships are breaking up or people are going their own way, we need the same thing. We need that same respect to understand that, you know what, they might be dealing with this different to me. Okay, because this particular experience that I'm recollecting, where I was dealing with someone who was acting hysterical, my main thought process was, they are not me. They're dealing with this different to me. I wasn't trying to judge them. I wasn't trying to say, why are you acting like this? My mindset was more so, I need to understand that this person's dealing with this different to me. How can I help them get through this? Because again, going back to that statement, my dad used to say to me, no conditions permanent. The day will come where they'll be over this level of the hype of this scenario, or this level of the drama of this scenario, or this level of the tragedy of this scenario. So how can I help them get through that? So that's something that I always keep mindful of, and think, how can I support people moving forward in that regard as well? So
thank you for sharing that. I'd be interested to know how you guys suggest how you can help others deal with loss, especially like in this time. One thing I think is important to mention as well is for those who, like, for example, in this scenario with George Floyd, like, how can we show support or help others deal with this loss? And one thing that came to mind was just saying, I understand. Do you know what I mean? Especially for those who are not part of the
community.
The target.
The target community that's directly affected. Just
saying, I understand, that I get it. And I'm feeling it as well. Like, that in itself can bring a lot of comfort to someone, especially for those who may be seen as the perpetrators, to know that you may look like a perpetrator, but you're not a perpetrator. It can be ministry in itself. So just for that to be mentioned as well.
See, I think it's interesting you raised that, because I personally disagree. Okay, not to say people shouldn't understand, but the first thing I'll say is, I don't think you should just say I understand if you don't understand.
Yeah, 100%.
That's obviously the Bible says, they shall know the truth, and the truth shall set them free. The reason I want to start there is because I've been through certain things. I don't want someone who don't understand coming to tell me I understand, because that doesn't help me. Okay, it doesn't help me. And look, let me even go further. Not only does it not help me, it only sets me up for more failure, because it makes me start believing that I can potentially engage with you about this. And what generally happens is, people then engage with these people who say they understand, and they clearly show they don't understand by creating more drama. So for me, I wouldn't be out there saying to people, look, just say you understand if you're not from that. What I'd be saying, and again, obviously my master's in teaching, I wrote about racism to a large degree, in my master's in teaching. And one of the things I'd encourage you to do if you don't understand is say you don't understand.
I don't understand, but for me, I feel like my emphasis weren't too much on I understand, even though I don't understand, but just to, what's the word, like, to hopefully put yourself in a position where you can feel the loss and be able to say, I feel this loss.
It's not going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. Personally,
just on a humane level, not because, like, so for example, I can feel someone's, like George Floyd. I feel the loss. I don't know that guy.
You feel a loss.
I feel a loss, yes.
And you feel a plight.
Plight?
Yeah, so like a damaging. You feel a wrong has been done. And that is the point I was gonna say. Like, what I would encourage people to do, if you're not from the environment, if you're not part of the community that are really directly affected, first and foremost, understand you're not from there. Because the moment you understand you're not from that, you can start working on potentially being a level of support from where you are. But then after understanding that, the next thing I'd be saying to you is deal with the scenario based on two metrics, and that is right and wrong.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying on a human level, because a human should be able to say right and wrong regardless of
but
gender, colour, race, etc. That's what I mean. Like,
what you're saying is totally right, but the problem is most human beings, they don't see black and white. Most human beings see subjectively based on themselves, based on experience. And this is one of the reasons, guys, I'm going to be so transparent with you. This is one of the reasons I am so pleased, glad and delighted that I'm a member of the faith I'm a member of. Because one of the first things I learned in my walk of faith is that I should not judge life by my experience. Guys, we should not do it. Okay, we should not do it. Someone might say, oh, you know, I can assume people in the comments, oh Samuel, but if you burn your finger on the stove, are you going to go back to the stove? Like, I'm not going to go back to the stove because I'm going to learn, okay, that that's not what you do. But the reality is I probably had learned that before my experience. Okay, the problem is people base things, their transactions, their decisions on experience, but they don't realize, for many people, and guys, maybe it's a wake-up call, but for many people, your experience has been engineered. Your experience has been engineered by the social economical standing you were born into. It's been engineered by the parents you had. It's been engineered by the school you went to. It's been engineered by the area you grew up in. It's been engineered by the friends you chose. And those friends you chose were probably also byproducts of this engineering. So the point I'm making is, if you judge everything based on your own experience, that's where there's a problem. And this is why the Bible says that it's a wicked and perverse generation that are asking for a sign, that are asking for their own experience to be the reason why they say, okay, God, I can walk with you. Because you don't need your own experience to understand the difference between right and wrong. You just need to become an observer. And the good thing about an observer is, a good observer is objective. Okay, that's why those two words are meshed like that. So the reason why it's important for me, if you're not from the community, if you are not an African or an Afro-Caribbean person, you're not a person of color, and you don't genuinely understand what's going on, my encouragement to you, if you want to be a support to the family of the human race, because that's what we are a human race, we are a family, we are a massive family. If you believe the Bible, like we believe the Bible, guys, we all came from Adam, who came from God. If you want to take it to the second level, we all came as a byproduct of Noah, who came from God. So the reality is,
all different shades of brown, guys.
All different shades of brown, okay? But the reality is, guys, if you don't understand, if you really don't understand, do two things. One, acknowledge you don't understand, and then secondarily, please just judge it based on right and wrong. Just say to yourself, is what happened right, or is what happened wrong? If the answer is what happened was wrong, then understand that people are going to be upset, people are going to be emotional, people are going to be distraught, people are going to be all the things we've spoken about, and some people are going to be calm. But it doesn't mean the calm people aren't thinking about how they can get an AK-47 and just start hammering people down. It doesn't mean that the calm people aren't thinking about how they can start making mass prayer movements. It doesn't mean the calm people aren't thinking. It just means that they're calm in the scenario. So I think for me, those would be the three positions or points I'd give to someone who's I don't want to use the term exclusive, but who's not directly necessarily affected by the plight of what's going on. Just first and foremost, appreciate and understand you don't understand. Okay. Secondarily, get to a position where you can just judge things by right and wrong. And if, like, for example, I'll give an example. Looting is wrong. That's stealing. It's wrong. So anybody stealing to protest about an injustice, you're only doing more injustice. Okay. Setting things on fire is wrong. So if you're setting stuff on fire, guys, you are creating
Because if you're setting idols on fire, it's good.
Yeah, if it's an idol, you know, something else. But if you're setting buildings on fire, which potentially could be idols, but if you're setting buildings on fire which you don't own, like again, you're breaking the law, and not only are you breaking the law, but you're doing something wrong. You're creating more injustice.
Yeah. And
you know,
two wrongs don't make a right.
Two wrongs don't make a right. But this is also, guys, for those of you who are watching, this is also why it's so important to understand a few of the things we were alluding to earlier, that from so much of the information we've seen, the people turning a peaceful protest into riots in the US are not the people protesting. So again, it's important. It's important to understand that, to think about that, to know that, to be aware of that. Yeah. So yeah, so that's my stance. I wouldn't be saying to them, yeah, you understand. Say I understand, because that can be patronizing.
Yeah, 100%.
Because how you gonna understand slavery? Because and the reason I'm saying this is because a black man murdered earlier on in the week, to some people, is a black man being murdered unjustly. Guys, it's got nothing to do with that. Like, George Floyd is another example of continued injustice to a certain kind of people. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? To a group of people who are being targeted. Okay, whether it be accidental targeting, whether it be purposeful targeting.
It's not accidental, come on.
Whatever. Look, the point I'm making is when we judge things based on right and wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, someone said something recently which I heard and I thought was powerful.
We can judge it based on right and wrong by comparing.
That's the point I'm making.
So we can't just say by accident. We know it's not, because when we look at it objectively, right and wrong, we can see there's. So
if it was an accident. Like, you're coming into the statistics now. You're saying if it was an accident, the same proportion of accidents will be happening across the board.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's take the word accident out. But the reality is this. Someone mentioned something earlier which I heard and I thought, you know what, that is so spot on. That's so powerful. They said this stuff is not new. The only difference is now it's being recorded and it's going viral. Now it's being filmed and it's going viral. And the funniest thing is, guys, if you're watching this to this
length of time
for this long, let us know in the comments if you feel as though this stuff is new, or if you feel as though this stuff's been going on for a long time and now it's just being recorded on cameras. But yeah, but like I said, guys, look, for me, I don't want someone who don't understand telling me they understand. If I'm gonna be totally honest, I don't even know if I want someone who thinks they understand telling me they understand. The only kind of person who I want telling me they understand is someone who can verifiably show me that they understand. And again, I'm not going to be reaching out to George Floyd's sister, who I saw on TV the other day, and be saying to her, I understand. Okay? Because I do not have a biological sibling who has been brutally murdered for the world to see on camera and it's going viral. I haven't been through that. I can try and empathize, but I haven't been through that. So for me personally, from my rationale, I'd be wrong to try and share like I've been through that or like I understand that. That's what so many people do. They try to say, oh yeah, you know, I lost my homie from on the streets when I was 15. Like, I know what you're going through. Like, guys, if it ain't the same, it ain't the same. Okay, and I'm not saying that you didn't feel lost. But what I'm saying is, if it isn't the same, it isn't the same. Try and mourn with them, support them, help them, but appreciate it's different. That's my thoughts.
I hear that. I hear that.
Cool. All right. So, in terms of moving forward, we've spoken about support in a few different ways. We've spoke first and foremost trusting in God, making it a God thing.
Yeah.
We went secondarily into talking about basically being there, showing up, which I think is so powerful. Showing up, I've heard once in leadership anyway, showing up is 90%. Okay, actually having the talent is the other 10%.
I was thinking 90% what? Okay.
90% of getting the job done.
Yeah, I get it.
You know, so showing up, you know, for your family, for people that need support, making sure that happens. I want to say that I think those things are kind of key. So making sure you're there for the person, but not only that, side by side with that, making sure you're trusting in God. I think they're some of the real keys. But
I was gonna say before we close, see if they've got any comments.
All right, cool. So we'll jump into the chat. See if anybody has any comments. Cool. So we've got a comment here.
I'll read it from here.
I'll let Robbie read the comments.
It's from Cosmios, who says, "But wouldn't you say that's the difference between men and women? Not as an absolute rule, but majority of the time they handle things differently."
Powerful. Well, the funniest thing is, Cosmios makes this comment, about wouldn't we say, and I assume this is referring to us talking earlier about how people deal with bereavement, deal with loss, etc. And one of the things I guess I would say is this: I think there's two paradigms. I think the first paradigm is every human being is unique. Every human being has our similarities. Like, we all bleed red blood. I'm gonna say that one more time. Okay, we all bleed red, R-E-D, red blood. Okay. Black people don't bleed black blood, okay? We all bleed red blood, okay? The reason I'm excessively emphasizing that is because I was taught once before that you should make explicit the implicit and make implicit sometimes the explicit. But the reason I'm sharing that is because of this. Jane Elliott, I call Jane Elliott a friend. I've never met the lady, but I admire her work. But Jane Elliott has done extensive work with people. And one of the things I heard her share once, I was reading a lot of her material when I was doing my master's in teaching a number of years back. But one of the things she shared is that she was talking to school teachers who would say that they thought that if the black child fell down and grazed their arm, they'll bleed black blood. Like, guys, just to be clear, we're all one family, okay? The human race family, okay? That's the first thing. So we all have similarities. If we're all one family, as a direct byproduct, we're all gonna have some similarities. But you will know, if you're a person with siblings, that just between you and your sibling, you're also gonna have differences. Okay? So the first paradigm I want to share is we are all unique, and because we're all unique, yes, I do believe that uniqueness plays a direct part in terms of how people deal with things. But then secondarily, we have groupings. We have subgroupings, and some of these are engineered, like I was talking about earlier, and some of them are biological, some of them are natural. So I personally, and I'll say this again just to be explicit, I personally believe there's a difference between a man and a woman. Okay, I believe that. Okay, we live in a society right now where some people don't believe it. Actually, let me be transparent. We live in a society right now where some people are trying to make you believe that it's not the reality and that they don't believe it. But the reality is, I think even those people believe it. But men and women are different, okay? And because men and women are different, yes, I believe Cosmios is 100% correct. The differences between men and women are one of the major byproducts as to why there are different ways in how people deal with things. But I also think that human beings are unique as well. So there are women out there who are more, I don't want to use this term, but for lack of a better word, reclusive.
I was say emotional. I was about to
No, just reclusive. Reclusive. So because they're reclusive, they might go through certain things and they want to walk away. They want to deal with it by walking away and maybe dealing with it with their God. And equally, there are men who are highly emotional. Like, the emotional bar is turned to another quadrant. Okay? Now, again, I'm not just talking about, we're going to end up in a whole other conversation. I don't want to go there. I'm not talking about the effeminate men and all of that, but there's men who are highly emotional. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because certain men who are highly emotional, they might be the men doing the hollering, the screaming, when someone passes away. Okay? And guys, people are different, and there's men and women. So that's what I'd say to Cosmios' comment. What's your thoughts?
I would say yes. Again, agreeing with you that not as an absolute rule, but the beautiful thing is how you see God has structured creation is, I guess, an interpretation for how we deal with things. Like someone said, there are similarities. So we are all humans. So we're going to deal with it as humans do, not as animals, for example. But then God has also created subcategories of male, female, race. Even race comes into it, where because of the culture, there's differences there. But then, as Samuel said, God has never created clones. Like, He's never created two people exactly the same, to the point that even when you have twins, they're not exactly the same. So
different fingerprints.
Even in visuals of how God has created us different, it's like an interpretation of how we will deal with things. So yes and no, I think is the answer to the question. That yeah, we will deal with things differently because we're men and women and we're different. But then also there's going to be some similarities between some men and some women, and some women and some men. Yeah.
Cool.
Like the same way you get a female chef that is like, oh, she can cook, you also find a male chef that's like, oh, he can cook. And it's neither.
Because of the gender.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's because of the agenda. Powerful.
Okay.
Alright guys, so with that being said, what we want to encourage you to do is, if you haven't hit like on this video yet, hit the like button.
Yes.
Side by side of that, if you haven't subscribed and you're not a part of the Simply I Can Win family, why don't you just hit subscribe and be part of the family and tell other people? And the third and foremost thing is, why don't you just share the community so other people can basically be a part of what we're doing? Guys, these videos are created to give you value, and that's what we're here for. So this is Samuel I Can Win,
and I'm Robbie I Can Win,
and we're signing out. Have a great night.
Much love, guys. Bye.